Hey neighbor, welcome back to 7 on Sunday. Artistic evolution is a tricky obstacle, and I think most bands would agree that it's hard to shake off the fans' expectations in order to challenge your sonic boundaries without also alienating everyone that supports you. Change is tough to get used to, but these 7 kept expectations spinning from day one. They're rug pullers, bands that take each corner of their discography as an opportunity to drift into uncharted places. Grab your popcorn, hit that like button for good luck, and keep in mind that while I'm gonna try and talk about every studio album by every band on the list, I might not get to everything, especially if they have a lot of them. Panic at the Disco's career took off in the most insane way imaginable, getting signed to a record deal before playing a single show and going multi-platinum out of the gate with their hyper-baroque pop-punk debut of Fever You Can't Sweat Out. Rather than basking in the glow of that success, the group took to the mountains to develop a more 60s-esque follow-up, Pretty Odd, a Beatles-inspired record that exposed a rift between its members and eventually led to 2 of them walking away from Panic at the Disco permanently. The departure of Ryan Ross had a massive impact on their future sound, as their now official leader Brendon Urie took the reins and pivoted himself and drummer Spencer Smith towards an edgier pop rock style that had more in common with Fever than it did Pretty Odd. Dallin Weekes joined Brendon as a full-time member just in time for album 4, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die in 2013. His songwriting contributions had a big impact, since much of the criticism against Vices and Virtues had to do with lyrics, and this Vegas-themed romp in the park ended up as a cross between alternative rock and electropop. Death of a Bachelor dropped the next year as the first solo album from Panic, and it somehow also became their first ever #1, going platinum and shaking up several hits as Brendon leaned into his pop sensibilities harder than ever for a new collab-heavy shakeup. These major changes made a lot of fans feel jaded, with their fears being doubled down upon as Brendon strutted into his Broadway pop era, Pray for the Wicked. LP7 Viva Las Vengeance marks the return of other band members for a surprisingly guitar-centric sound. The album was recorded entirely to tape, which I always respect when I see it in the digital age, and its more 70s arena rock sound marks yet another notch in the many belts of a panicking disco. As British musician Damon Albarn's primary band Blur went into hibernation, Gorillaz rose from the ashes as an ambitious, genre-bending project that paired unmistakable sounds with a cartoon band animated by Jamie Hewlett. Their debut self-titled album touched down seemingly out of nowhere, with its trip-hop meets alt-rock sensibilities being provocative enough to help fans see the animation less as a gimmick, but more as a new form of expression for a set of artists who clearly knew what they were doing. Buzz continued to soar as Gorillaz launched their most successful album Demon Days in 2005, spawning the worldwide hits Feel Good Inc. and Dare. The album itself brimmed with flexibility and collaboration, which we'd see more and more of over time, riding high on atmospheric bliss, ranging from chilled-out rap to experimental art rock. After that, Damon began to rethink his approach to the project and took some time away for other collaborations before returning with what I think is their most fully realized masterpiece, Plastic Beach. It may have been a 5-year wait to get there, but the lush, unpredictable pacing paid off in spades as everything from strings, funk, and even comedy showed up for LP3. Fans barely caught their breath before Damon unveiled The Fall for Christmas Day that same year in 2010. The 43-minute album sailed the lo-fi seas for more of a gloomy mood, as the frontman recorded what ended up being a very mixed bag entirely on an iPad in just 32 days. After a 7-year hiatus, Jamie and Damon finally reconvened for a new era known as Humans in 2017. LP5 is a scatterbrained but important collection of tracks, stepping out of bounds wildly with a massive amount of guest features that genuinely do add a lot of adaptability to the Gorillaz name. The constantly flipping coin landed on the summery synth-pop record The Now Now the very next year, showcasing that Damon was very much in the groove, as they again reinvented after that, building out the Song Machine series, which became home to some of the best Gorillaz songs to date. Radiohead started off as a grungy rock band that didn't stand out much at all by the time they had released their debut album Pablo Honey in 1993. There's great songs on there, but it wasn't until the roaring triumph, The Bends, 2 years later, that these guys truly found their place in music. That album stands tall as a defining moment in the world of 90s rock and Britpop, but their 1997 magnum opus OK Computer went way beyond that and changed the music world forever. It's a legacy album that blends societal commentary, intense guitars, dense layering, mind-blowing production techniques, and a huge spectrum of emotion from their frontman Thom Yorke. England's most perceptive band struck again with the polarizing Kid A in the year 2000. This, alongside the 2001 companion Amnesiac, got people talking about the weirdness of Radiohead more than ever before. Hail to the Thief came 2 years later, only continuing to prove that we were witnessing gods among men as they returned to rocking, but in an even more clever, hard-to-decode manner. By the time In Rainbows launched in 2007, Radiohead had seemingly ascended to become bulletproof. They crafted a fascinating labor of love that unearthed their most intricate instrumental work to date, bonding their chemistry as a band while undoubtedly moving the sad boy parade full steam ahead. They stalled out ever so slightly with the clunky King of Limbs in 2011, chewing up experimental sounds as per usual for Radiohead, but without the conviction of past works. Thankfully, they corrected course after a 5-year gap, but as we all know, true love waits, and that's the exact commandment handed down on their 2016 album, A Moon-Shaped Pool. Beck Hansen never struck me as the kind of guy to sit around twiddling his thumbs. Reach for the top shelf, and you'll find the man that goes by his first name tearing it up with his takes on hip-hop, folk, indie, synth-pop, R&B, rock, and funk. The early 90s pushed out a pair of records ripe with sarcasm as Beck joined the anti-folk movement before really hitting the jackpot on his off-kilter experimental rock package Mellow Gold in 1994. After his final independent record One Foot in the Grave flirted heavily with alternative country that same year, Beck didn't stop to rest on his laurels, choosing to go sample heavy on one of the most beloved albums of the 90s, Odelay. Mutations solidified the musician as an unpredictable force to be reckoned with, using his time in the last part of that decade to lean into his folkier tendencies before shedding that coat on a complete makeover Midnight Vultures, a fan-fucking-tastic experience brimming with funky grooves for days. 3 years later came Beck's biggest turn yet, as the songwriter reflected on heartbreak after the end of a 9-year relationship. He enlisted the help of his father David Campbell for the album's string arrangements, adding a special texture to the melancholic folk sound that he'd later revisit on his 2014 LP Morning Phase. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, Beck did put out 3 more records in the 2000s. That's when I first connected to his music, as he took time out to embrace hip-hop, psychedelia, and even some rock stylings produced by the likes of Nigel Godrich and Danger Mouse. Beck's output slowed significantly during the 2010s, with just 3 albums appearing during that decade. Colors came to light in 2017 after a long ingestion period, wrapping its noose around the folds of pop music and sprinkling in plenty of that Beck magic for once again a very different feel at the hands of producer Greg Kurstin. His 14th effort Hyperspace landed in late 2019, standing as his most recent album at the time of this video. It took on more of a synth-pop affectation to mixed results, to put it nicely, bogged down by its cheapened sound and lack of truly memorable hooks to give fans a reason to come back. My Chemical Romance formed from humble beginnings as a New Jersey band with gigantic pipe dreams, who eventually struck gold and became quite possibly the most influential and dynamic band of the 2000s. You probably wouldn't guess that if you'd only heard their 2002 debut, I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love, a rough around the edges emo meets screamo stud that'll knock your teeth out faster than you can say vampires will never hurt you. Labels took notice of the band's rising popularity, eventually signing to a division of Warner Brothers to deliver their more polished pop-punk post-hardcore juggernaut 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge. This album changed everything for My Chem and the scene they were a part of, jumping from Warped Tour's side stage mainstays to headlining and then some within a few short years. Ambition was never downplayed in MCR. and nothing could possibly drive home that point harder than what they did next in 2006. I'm of course referring to their classic concept album, The Black Parade, a stunning work of art that heightened the level of melodrama for an unbreakable rock opera. Danger Days is indeed the party at the end of the world, a place nearly polar opposite of The Black Parade even though it's also a concept album. Mask up, party on, turn on the retro wave of color. After the compilation Conventional Weapons showed us My Chem from a much more punky, off-the-leash angle, they broke up in 2013, only to return in 2019 in the California desert. What direction they take after dropping the bombshell prog rocker The Foundations of Decay is anyone's guess, but I for one no longer have a single doubt in my mind that it's going to be yet another bold step forward. The Yeah Yeah Yeahs formed in New York City circa 2000. They started off as a sweat-dripping garage rock revival act on their first full album Fever to Tell in 2003, but many people took notice of their sleeper hit Maps that seemed to hit at a very different direction being in the cards. Psychic or not, they played a unique hand every single time, when they could have easily folded to coast on similar vibes for as long as they wanted. Instead, Show Your Bones arrived in 2006 as a flaming arrow to the heart of rock, taking time out to refocus their chemistry as a trio and dial up the melody on what I honestly think might be their best record. Things got even weirder in a very good way, as It's Blitz put the nail in the coffin of anyone pigeonholing them as this, that, or the other thing, when in fact they were everything everywhere all at once. It's Blitz showcases the Yeah Yeah Yeahs' innate ability to walk out of their own bubble, adding razor-sharp synth-punk to their resume alongside some killer alternative rock and pop physics, as evidenced by tracks like Dragon Queen, Soft Shock, and of course Zero. Sadly, a bit of the magic faded by the time Mosquito landed in 2013, earning a more mixed response to its art rock delivery. The sequencing felt off, and the whacked out production didn't do it any favors, and the band went on hiatus shortly after. Karen O, Nick Zinner, and Brian Chase finally returned to the stage in 2017, and eventually announced a new album in 2022 after a 9-year gap. Given how dazzling and emotional its lead single Spitting Off the Edge of the World feels, it's clear that another change of pace is on the way, and you don't need a crystal ball to hear it. No one else could have taken this spot. The Australian band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard have proven themselves to be an unstoppable workhouse, managing to release, a cool 20 albums and counting in just 10 years, which is insane. Beyond that incomprehensible insanity of actually having the guts to release that much music is the full arsenal of genres on the assembly line. Rock and roll is a no-brainer to be under their belt, but just join me for just a second. We're gonna do some cooking out loud. Here's the recipe. Add psychedelics, a pinch of acid house, take some heavy metal, a dash of dream pop, and throw in traces of jazz, prog rock, and whatever the hell else you can reach, and baby, you got a stew going. This band's ever-expanding universe can feel really intimidating to enter. Trust me, I haven't even come close to chowing down on that 20-course meal, but I'm slowly worming my way in, and I have sampled music from their entire catalog just to make sure that I had a solid grasp on their evolutions. King Giz have a restless inertia as a unit, the kind of drive that leads to an endless pool of ideas that most bands would probably say, oh sure, we'd love to maybe try that out someday, but they erased the waiting game and carpe diem the fuck out of it. If you're looking to ring the doorbell of the Lizard Wizard, so to speak, I'd suggest some of my personal favorites based on what I've discovered so far, including the Perfect Loop Nonagon Infinity that rocks out in garagey psychedelics, along with Fishing for Fishies, Infest the Rat's Nest, and even their recent double album Omnium Gatherum that feels like a pretty good summation of everything they do well. Hey, thank you for watching till the end. I appreciate that. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I make videos like this all the time, and there's a playlist with hundreds of other episodes right here on screen. You can find my socials linked in the description. Give my Instagram a follow at ARTVJohn, and I'll report back soon with more on ARTV.